Thanks to the courageous service of the men and women of the American military, that evil regime was overthrown. And in its place came hopes for a democracy in the heart of the Middle East, hopes for a victory in the war for the hearts and minds of the Muslim world. As of today, sadly, as we all know, those hopes have not been realized. Because of the ruthless conduct of our enemies in Iraq, as well as our own failures, we instead today find ourselves on a knife's edge in Iraq. Now, a new course has been chosen. A new commander is in place in Iraq, confirmed unanimously by the Senate. A new Secretary of Defense is in place at the Pentagon, also confirmed overwhelmingly by this Senate. And a new strategy has begun to be put into action on the ground in Iraq by American troops. It is altogether proper that we debate our policy in Iraq. It should be a debate that is as serious as the situation in Iraq and that reflects the powers the Constitution gives to Congress in matters of war. But that, sadly, is not the debate that the Warner 11 resolution invites us to have. I'm going to speak strongly against this resolution because I feel strongly about it. I do so, Mr. President, with the greatest respect for my colleagues who have offered it. But I believe its passage would compromise America's security, and I will say so in the clearest terms I can muster. The resolution before us, its sponsors concede, will not stop the new strategy from going forward on the ground in Iraq. In fact, as we speak here in the Senate, thousands of American troops are already there in Baghdad, with thousands more moving into position to carry out their commander's orders. This resolution does nothing to alter those facts. Instead, its sponsors say it will send a message of rebuke from this Senate to the President of the United States, from one end of Pennsylvania Avenue to the other. But the President has made clear that he will not be deterred in carrying out what he sees as his duties and responsibilities as Commander-in-Chief. And there is a world well beyond Pennsylvania Avenue that is also watching and listening to what we do here. What we say here is being heard in Baghdad by Iraqi political leaders, by moderates trying to decide whether we Americans will stand with them over the long term. What we say here is being heard by our men and women in uniform, who naturally will be interested in knowing whether we support the plan they have been asked to carry out at risk to their own lives. What we say here in the Senate will be heard by the leaders of the thuggish regimes in Iran and Syria, and by al-Qaeda terrorists eager for evidence that America's will is breaking. And what we say here in the Senate will be heard across America by our constituents who are wondering if their Congress is capable of serious action, not just hollow posturing. This resolution is not about Congress taking responsibility. It is the opposite. This is a resolution of irresolution. For the Senate to take up a symbolic vote of no confidence on the eve of a decisive battle is unprecedented, but it is not inconsequential. It is an act which I fear will discourage our troops, hearten our enemies, and showcase our disunity. And that is why I will vote against the motion for cloture. My colleagues, if you believe that General Petraeus and his new strategy have a reasonable chance of success in Iraq, then you should resolve to support him and his troops through the difficult days ahead and oppose this resolution. On the other hand, if you believe that this new strategy is flawed or that our cause is hopeless in Iraq, then you should put aside this resolution, non-binding, and you should vote to stop what's happening in Iraq. Vote to cut off the funds. Vote for a binding timeline for American withdrawal. If that is where your convictions lie, then have the courage of your convictions to accept the consequences of your convictions. That would be a resolution. This non-binding resolution before us, by contrast, is an accumulation of ambiguities and inconsistencies. It is at once for the war but also against the war. It pledges its support to the troops in the field, but then washes its hands of what they have been commanded to do. It urges more troops be sent for Anbar province, but not for Baghdad. My colleagues, we cannot have it both ways. We cannot vote full confidence in General Petraeus, but no confidence in the strategy he says he needs for success. We cannot say that our troops have our full support, but disavow their mission on the eve of battle. This is what happens when you try to wage war by committee. And that is why the Constitution gave the authority of commander-in-chief to one person, the president. Cynics may say this kind of irresolution happens all the time here in Congress. In this case, however, they would be wrong. If it passed, this resolution would be unique in American legislative history. I asked the Library of Congress this question last week and was told that never before, when American soldiers have been in harm's way, fighting and dying in a conflict that Congress had voted to authorize, has Congress turned around and passed a non-binding resolution like this one, disapproving of a particular battlefield strategy. I ask each of my colleagues to stop for a moment and consider the precedent that passage of this resolution would establish. Even during Vietnam, even after the Tet Offensive, even after the invasion of Cambodia, Congress did not take up a non-binding resolution like this one. Past Congresses certainly debated wars. They argued heatedly about them, and they sometimes clashed directly with the executive branch, with the president, over their execution. But in so doing, they accepted the consequences of their convictions. This resolution does no such thing. It is simply an expression of opinion. It does not pretend to have any substantive effect on the policy on the ground in Iraq. But again, I ask my colleagues, what will this resolution say to our soldiers? What will it say to our allies?